What up, everybody? Scuffy here, and today we're going to be doing ourselves another card by card reboot. We're going to be taking a look at the Emperor's Children. The Emperor's Children was the third legion, and it's also third into the order of what we're looking at. I'm just going to go across the rows, so I mean it might be a while before we get to the Loyalists, and that's okay. But first off and foremost, we've got the Emperor's Children here. Now these guys have seen some adjustments. Not as many as others, but certainly very impactful. I'm going to take a look at each of these factions here, tell you how they stack up, what cards to keep an eye out for in the shop, what warlords work, how they rank up in general. How have they aged? The Emperor's Children were one of the initial starting factions. There was 4 factions, and they were 3. They were the third of the 4. Let's start by taking a look at Fabius Bile. Now, Fabius Bile was the first epic warlord that I received in the game, playing way back when in beta. He was also his ability has not changed. He enhances a friendly troop. What that does has changed over time. At one point in time, that was an ability that you could give him +1/+1, +1/+2, +2/+2. I think as high as +3/+3. But you could also add Bloodthirst, which would allow them to attack twice. You could add Stun, which was always a random possibility that you might accidentally stun your own troop. So it was always kind of a catch bait. And as time has gone on, they've kind of tweaked and changed that. I think you can get poison in there now still, and I think it still caps at +2/+2. I could be wrong. But he has uses. He has uses, especially if you're using him in conjunction with like a card like Neeser's Scouts or some other stealth type troop that you can get out on turn 1. Have these guys hidden and then just pump them up to crazy amounts before you utilize them. He's very functional. And you never know what you're going to get. His ability is a little random, so that does lead to some variable in there. And if your opponent is able to randomly destroy with a win of the week or something like that, you lose some traction. Or if they are able to jam your troop that you buffed up. But overall, not a bad warlord. Now, Vulgrim is their Primarch. He has changed a few ways. His Whispers of Chaos. Initially, his ability has always been the same in terms of adding an attack to his hand. His initiative has gone up and down. It's back up to high, which is good. But his Whispers used to be way back when, was like -1 when you attacked your opponent's warlord with Fulcrum, and then it changed to the cost changed, and they adjusted it to it was a trigger cost when you triggered tactics that triggered perfection, which was just not happening, and now you can trigger it just when you trigger perfection in general, which is a way better way to go. I think he's in a very good spot. He's very flexible. His ability to create a random Emperor's Children tactic in your hand every turn, it just can give you so much value early on depending on what you get. Late game, it helps you keep cards in your hand as well as triggering perfection. Just a very versatile warlord. I think Vulgrim has had his ups and downs, and right now he's on an upswing. He's got a very playable ability, and he works good. And if you've got Vulgrim, you should have some fun with him, especially within the scope of utilizing a lot of Emperor's Children cards to make the most of that perfection. Now, Lucius, he's got high initiative. However, he has had some ups and downs, and he's on more of the downswing just because of the current state of the game. He's got a great battle honor that he can act again. And with his ability, increasing his attack, it allows him to clear board as well as attack your opponent directly. The trade-off with that is, of course, he's taking damage from whatever troops that he's attacking. So if he's felling multiple troops, he's at a disadvantage in the health game, which is when you have to rely on other tactics that deal damage, fast troops, whatever the case may be. He also has 30 health. Now, anybody who's played Lucius efficiently will attest that 35 health is not good for him to have, only for the simple fact that then it would become unfair. Because roughly, if you factor in how you can stack up his attack value, especially with cards such as Concentrated Fire or cards such as Hold the Line to replenish your energy, you can get his attack up very quickly. And if you give him 5 additional health, which could arguably be 2 additional turns, that is enough time for him to get an attack of 7 to 10 in those 2 turns each. And that's too strong. So he's a good warlord. Again, the current meta has shifted. He's a little bit more of a downswing. But I think his ability and his battle honor work. I don't think there's anything there to change. I think it's really the meta has to change, and if you're playing Lucius, you have to change your deck a lot more to suit it, and that kind of throws off the whole point of playing with him for now. And then Saul Tarvitz, and if he asks for me, Saul Tarvitz, boy, I cannot recall which one was his first ability. I think initially he had Battle Honor, Heal 1 or 2, and then he had a ability that cost 1 and lowered your next card by 2 or something like that. His current ability now is the one that matters because it is really good. You can play. I've done several videos on Tarvitz. I've played Tarvitz for 2 whole seasons. You can just play ahead of curve consistently with him and put a lot of pressure on. Even though he's a 30 hit point warlord, the fact that he can bring out the high cost cards, especially in conjunction with Tactical Brilliance, which we'll talk about next. With Saul Tarvitz, that's a card coming in 3 turns earlier. And that is usually before your opponent has any answers to respond to that, and they have to deal with that card. So, arguably, in my opinion, he's the best Emperor's Children warlord, but you could make an argument for Fulgrim being up there, given the health difference, given the whispers that Fulgrim has got, and how much easier it is, as well as Fulgrim having high initiative, whereas Tarvitz has got medium initiative. But I like Tarvitz. I like Tarvitz as a character, and I also like him as a warlord, and I don't think he is dropped out at all in terms of how you could play him. Now, talking about Tactical Brilliance, this feels like a bread and butter staple with the Emperor's Children. If you do not have this card, you see this card in the shop, you want to have 2 of these in your deck. Not just with Tarvitz, but with any of the Emperor's Children cards, being able to bring your next card in for 2 less. For instance, with Fabius Bile, you could use Tactical Brilliance on turn 1 if you wanted to, play a Neaser Scout, and then use Fabius Bile's ability and pump them up on the same turn that they arrive. The trade-off to that is there's no card advantage there. You're not drawing a card, you're just straight paying a card to lower the cost of the next card you played, so you have to be able to replenish your hand. But it is a very good card. And with a warlord like Saul Tarvitz, you are increasing the value on that. It is not at all uncommon to see, some of these higher 7 cost, 8 cost, even the 10 cost cards come out 3 to 5 turns earlier. How do you get 5 turns, you might ask? Well, as we're talking strategy and concepts, we're going to take a look at a card, whether it be Abandoned Supplies, or if it is something a little bit more specific, such as supply lines. If Saul Tarvitz, for example, is able to place supply lines on turn 1 using his ability, and you've only got, 3 vehicles in your deck, and one of those vehicles happens to be your Subjugator Titan. Your Subjugator Titan is now in your hand at 8 cost. And then at 5 energy, you use Tactical Brilliance, which makes it a 6 cost. You use Saul Tarvitz's ability. You now have played a Subjugator Titan for 5 energy. It is not at all uncommon to see. It's pretty brutal. It's pretty brutal to see. So that is one way to go about doing it. It's just as possible with Vulgrim, although you lack Tarvitz's ability. But you can still make that work at 6 energy. And again, if your opponent cannot answer that big nasty 10-10 cleave 10 shield troop, then it's going to wrap up things pretty quickly. Now, Dar Mozian Squad has got a 1 energy return to hand. These guys are filler. These guys feel like they've always been filler. Their cost is nice, but their stats and their ability, they're really in event decks, but they're also more for those cheaper decks that are looking to find a way to facilitate perfection. And as of yesterday, I think what we're going to see with the counterattack cards that have been added, the Emperor's Children counterattack card costs 1 energy and it draws you a card. That's going to be head and shoulders above Dar Mozian. Now, granted, that's only if you are going second in the game. You won't be going first in the game, so you don't have any control over that. But there really is no reason to play Dar Mozian. In all honesty, there's none. Diversionary Tactics makes for a much better 1-cost card. Stunning is a very powerful tool in this game. You don't see this in every deck. It works very well in a Fabius Bile deck if you're looking to buy yourself some time. Also, if Fulgrim happens to generate it, it's useful, again, to buy yourself some time. But as a 1-cost, what it really helps serve is it bridges that gap on those odd energy turns to help you trigger perfection easier. Andronius is another perfection. This is actually the first one that we're going to take a look at here with perfection. And perfection does an additional ability if it spends all your energy to use that card. And for this one here, you also jam the target that you're dealing damage. Now, the order on this is important because you're dealing 2 damage and then you're jamming. You're not jamming and then dealing damage. So if that troop is shielded, if they have some sort of ability that triggers when they take damage, whatever the case may be, that's going to go off and then the jam is going to happen. So just kind of keep that in mind. Andronius is okay. It's a good common. It's a good way to start out. I think as the game has progressed, unless you're playing with Fulgrim who wants to trigger perfection as much as possible, I think there's better ways to go about with a 2-cost card. Now, Volca's Tactical Squad, these guys don't have a great health, but they do have Drop Pod on perfection, so technically they've got 3-4 health. And in some games, that makes a difference. When you're talking about trying to figure out how to avoid flankers, that helps break that gap, and it requires 2 actions just the same for your opponent to deal with these guys hitting the board. And if they have not been destroyed, and on your next turn you can enhance them with something like either Fabius Bile or Unbreakable Focus or something like that, then that's good too. So they've got a use in there, and sometimes I go back and forth between Volcus and Severian. I'm not a fan of Therian Platoon, but we'll talk about them in just a second. Concentrated Fire. Now, this is a card that, in conjunction with a warlord such as Lucius, or if it is pulled by Fulgrim randomly, then you have got the potential late game to increase your warlord's attack anywhere between 1, because it counts your warlord. For each friendly unit, that counts your warlord. So just by playing this, you're increasing your warlord's attack by 1. And if you've got 2 or 3 other units, you're increasing it by 2 or 3 more. And if you've got Lucius' ability, or if you've got, hold the line or anything that's replenishing your energy, you can just ramp that up high value and go for that. So it's not bad in a pinch, but it is for certain decks. You're not going to play Concentrated Fire in a Saul Tarvitz or a Fabius Bile deck necessarily. You're going to use it especially for Lucius, and maybe as a clutch for Fulgrim, but not heavily. Now, Therian Platoon, again, I'm on the fence with these guys. These guys trigger perfection, and that's very good for Fulgrim, and they draw a card, and that's very good for the Emperor's Children in general. But their 2/2 stat line leaves me wanting a lot more. Now, I think that's a fair exchange for their cost and for what they do on perfection. But I like to have a little bit more oomph. I like to have a perfection +1/+1 from Therian Squad for 3 attack, 3 health. I like to have 3 attack and drop pod. I like to have a little bit more punch and a little bit more longevity. Getting card advantage is necessary, especially if you're playing a deck that focuses on playing on curve or playing ahead of curve, which is what the Emperor's Children do. But if you're just trading bodies and you're just tossing away cards that don't mean anything, these guys are easily fellable by any warlord ability that deals damage. 90% of the warlord abilities that deal damage. There's a couple that deal 1 damage, but just the same, I'd pass on these guys in preference for something like Therian Squad. And Therian Squad, again, also triggers perfection, but they have that stat bump, and I prefer them more. They're both commons, as well as Volca Squad, but I still feel like these guys are the better ones. Unless you're running like a Fulgrim perfection deck, in which case you may want to include 2 Severian and 2 Wratheron, or 2 Volcas. I've actually seen a couple Fulgrim decks that draw a lot, and so they use Therian Platoon to draw through their deck so they can cycle Pride of the Emperor. And we're going to get to that card in just a second. Now, Aesoton Squad, these guys are pretty good. For 3, they've got decent stats, and their ability is good. It has not changed. This card has not changed at all, and that, I think, is a good testament as far as how valuable this card has done. So far, in honesty, the Warlords have changed throughout this game. Concentrated Fires, the artwork has changed, but so far, these cards here that we've looked at have not changed at all. They've remained what they have always been. And I think that's a testament value to the early game of the Emperor's Children. Airhorn has also not changed. Take it as it is. It's probably one of the least favored tactics I like to generate with Fulgrim. It has its uses, but it's not fantastic because basically you return a friendly troop to your hand. Okay, that's great. There's rally troops, there's fast troops, there's things that can make that value. Your perfection is it's reducing the cost by 2. Well, the problem with that is then if I return a troop to my hand, then I've used up all my energy, so I'm not playing anything else. I'm not playing them a second time this turn, and that puts me at a disadvantage. even though it's reducing them by 2. It's not bad, and it only triggers a friendly troop, so it's not used as an offensive maneuver whatsoever, unless you're returning like a fast troop with higher health, then you can use that a second time on your next turn, but you're not going to affect your opponent's board whatsoever, and you're really kind of leaving yourself vulnerable and open. I don't include these in my decks, but I often get them from Fulgrim, and they are in event decks, and again, they have a purpose, but it's not a great purpose. For the Emperor is a good card. The ability is very simple. Reduce the cost of all cards in your hand by 1. If you have a 5-card hand and you reduce them all by 1, that's great. If you have a 7-card hand, that's even better. This is not something that you want to play, though, if you have a 2 or 3-card hand, because you'll find yourself playing both those cards in your next turn, and then you are playing with a 0-card hand. And that is a bad position to be in. So for the Emperor requires some very strategical play. Now, at one point in time in the game, the way the game played, along with some other cards, particular Teloth's Changers, which is a demon. I'll just take a look at that card. It's nothing like it used to be, and that's probably, in all fairness, that's probably a good thing that these guys aren't the same that they used to be. The artwork isn't even the same here. But they have changed. That card was very crucial for a one-turn. We like to call it the pew pew laser show, because that's what would happen for the Emperor 10-card hand, and then you could play like 10 cards, and Telos Changers is zapping everything everywhere. That's not the case anymore. This card still has uses late when you have, or I'd say mid-game when you have 5 or 6 cards in hand, but it's not as effective. It's not as useful. I think for a newer player, it's good to have one of those. It's not critical, and it doesn't really feed into any specific build. It's something that you can use to enhance your build, but that is not required or that fuels into a build. And do not think that For the Emperor in conjunction with Tarvitz is a great idea. It's not a bad idea, but it's not a great idea for the same way that you can peter out your hand very quickly with his ability, and then you're playing top deck, and you don't want to ever play top deck. I should do a training cage video about top decking, because I think that's a concept that some people, I think a lot of people kind of understand when they're in this situation, but maybe not necessarily what it relates to outside of the situation. Hall of Rights. This is a great epic. Don't disparage this epic. Now, this is a structure, which means it's vulnerable to some straight up destruction from cards that destroy structures, or from warlords such as Durak Rask and Forex, because they can attack it and destroy the structures. So that's a possibility. But if your opponent cannot get rid of this, and by the way, this used to have 7 health. This has 2 and 5 health, so it's a lot easier to get rid of now. But if your opponent can't get rid of it, and you're able to get even 1 troop off with a Mark of Corn or a Mark of Slanesh, which gives them sneak attack, they're going to regret it. And then they've got to deal with that troop in conjunction to the Hall of Rights that's still blessing your troops more. I like this as a 1-of. I think you can do it as a 2-of in some decks. It's possible. And you're able to get that out first turn with Tarvitz. Your opponent will be sad, because they know that you're just going to follow it up with other troops that are going to be nasty to begin with. They're going to be a turn ahead, and then they're also going to have marks of chaos on top of them. It's random, so you don't know what you're going to get, right? You could get a mark of Nurgle. You could get a mark of Zinch, which might not do anything for you, but that random factor can often sway the game, and I like this as an epic. I think picking up one of these in the shop is worthwhile. Now, Kelana Squad, these guys' stats aren't bad. Their perfection is not great, though. 4/3 for 3 cost is okay. They're dealt with fairly easy enough by warlords and tactics, but they gain unstoppable. The trade-off, though, is if you're able to play these guys later game and then enhance them with an Unbreakable Focus, making them a much stronger troop. So there's that. Otherwise, as far as 3 costs go, in all honesty, I prefer either Aceton Squad or the Timberland Bikes, which feel like, again, another staple. And we're going to get to these guys in just a second. Peak conditions. That's pretty simple. This doesn't seem like such a great card at first, right? Because if your opponent doesn't have a whole lot of troops, or they're a solo warlord like Angron, you're going to give a troop +1/+1. However, it has its applications, especially if you've got an unstoppable unit and your opponent has just thrown down an Ornithop Barge and they've got 4 more units. Then you just make your unstoppable unit +4/+4 for 3. which is sometimes all it takes to win the game. This card used to be a lot better, not in terms of its stats or abilities. It does the exact same thing it's always done, but just in terms of the way the game played and the state of the game, you could get a lot more value out of peak condition. It's harder to get a lot of value out of it. It's a lot easier to get a value out of Unbreakable Focus now, but it's still something that every now and then you throw in there, or if you generate it with Vulgrim, you can find a use for it. Timberland Bikes, we talked about this. These guys are these guys should be a staple. If you do not have them in your Emperor's Children deck, you want them. They are common. I don't know if they're the best common, but they are a very good common for the Emperor's Children. They put pressure on your opponent. They're a 3/3. They've got sneak attack. They're very easily dealt with because they've got 3 health. They're vehicles, so they could be crack grenade. But if your opponent cannot get rid of them, or if you're able to increase their stats with Fabius Bile or peak conditions, Unbreakable Focus, whatever the case may be, your opponent has a nasty sneak attack troop that they have to deal with, that they cannot ignore, and that just buys you time and at the same time deals some great damage. So I really like these bikes. Unbreakable Focus is the tactic that really makes the Emperor's Children sing. It's a perfection tactic, so it works with Fulgrim. Gives your troops +1/+1. All your troops. That's good. For the perfection bonus, you're basically giving them all +2/+2. And that's even better, especially if you've got 3 or 4 troops on the board that all suddenly go up by +2/+2. That's a huge boost. I don't know if every deck needs 2 of these in them like they used to, but it feels like some decks certainly can get +2/+2. If you're able to play Fabius Bile at 5 energy and enhance that Nisor Scout, and then play Unbreakable Focus and give them a +2/+2 in addition to that, I mean, it doesn't take long before that Nisor Scout that started out as a 1/3 can very quickly become like a 7, 8, 9, 13 with Bloodthirst, and that's pretty much game. So that's one way to go about doing that. Now, here we get to a card that finally, Hall of Rights, I think, was the first card that we saw that actually saw change, right? This thing used to have 7 health. It went down. It's got 5 health now, and it's still good. Discipline, on the other hand, was terrible, and this is the first card that was changed to be much better. Discipline used to have the same cost, but it was just heal 1 for 4. And then Perfection, also heal your troops. And now it heals 2. It has a better option in there in terms of gaining that. You can recover as if your opponent's board is completely full. That's 14 health coming back onto you, whereas before, the odds of it being completely full, that would give you 7 health, and that's not even a fair exchange in that state because odds are you're going to take 7+ damage from however many troops are over on the board. But giving your Warlord 14 health is very good, and generating that, or even just having that in your deck as Fulgrim and being able to buy yourself more time, give yourself more health, and then get to his Whisper state, which I didn't talk about, but I really should. Demon Prince Fulgrim is, I think, one of my favorite Demon Princes. Not that I like him as a character, I really don't. In terms of ability, you're dealing 2, you're stealing 3 health. Stealing 3 health means that they take 3 damage and you gain 3 health. So that's actually a swing of 6 damage for 2 energy. They lose 3, you gain 3. And that can go on your opponent's Warlord, or that can go on a troop. So not only that are you stealing the health, you could be killing a troop, gaining health. And then it just, yeah, I don't have anything bad to say about that. Now, Untitled Squad, these guys are also a common, and they've not changed, and they're great. They deal 2 damage as a rally. That's good. That's always versatile. That's always worthwhile to have, and then you're putting a body down on the table. Perfection, very easy to achieve with a 4 energy, and often is the case, you stun the target. And again, stunning is not to be overlooked. It's very useful. There should be 2 of these in every Emperor's Children deck. There's no reason not to run 2 of them, whether they are used late game to save yourself and give a stun or to deal the lethal damage, or they're used early game to stun your opponent's Warlord and buy yourself some time to buff up troops or play another tactic, whatever the case may be. These guys are just good, period. If you're playing Emperor's Children, play them. If you don't have them, pick them up. Hold at Old Costs is not a required legendary. It's a decent legendary for a few applications in the fact that it refills your energy. That's good, because at 10 energy, if you play this at 10 energy, you're essentially getting 16 energy in that turn. I've only ever once used the perfection ability to draw 5 more cards. So that feels like a throwaway, like an extra bonus, like, okay, just in the event that you didn't have anything to spend that energy on, we'll give you some cards to do it. But just really using it for the energy boost. But it doesn't do a lot when you want to put bodies on the board, or early in the game at 4 to 6 energy. It's not as worthwhile. It is much more important when you have 8 to 10 energy. So early games or decks that focus on winning at 8 or less energy, which is what generally, I would say Lucius, but Lucius can actually use that energy and just use his ability again. But generally, Pride of the Emperor, Saul Tarvitz playing ahead of curve, you want to put bodies down versus getting more energy to put more things down. You shouldn't be in that position. So it's not necessarily a needed card for the faction. You can pass on that until you need to collect everything for the faction. Laertes Squad, these guys, they just don't do anything for me. The ability seems cool in terms of perfection +1 for each friendly Astartes troop. That seems good. But as you get to the 4-cost turn, you'll find that either your Astartes troops that are Eidichin is just a better choice, or your lower cost troops probably aren't surviving. So they won't be around for him to get much of a +1/+1. And then a lot of the other later game cards that you rely on are vehicles. So he doesn't mix well. Decent perfection ability. I've never really gotten him above a +1/+1. And I'd much rather just have a stun and dealing 2 damage versus a conditional stat buff. Longinus is another great card. This is a good, solid tactic. This is their 4-cost, or their equivalent of the Chariot of Gods from the Sons of Horus. Instead of dealing 4 damage and drawing a card, you're dealing 3 damage, and if the target dies, you're drawing 2 cards. It's a little conditional there, but you're getting more for your money. And I think that is important with the Emperor's Children, given how, as I said, you need to have cards in hand so you do not end up in a top deck situation. Whether that is Tarvitz, Fulgrim, by any of the Emperor's Children Warlords events included, you don't want to run out of cards, and Longinus is a great way to do some damage on the board, destroy a unit, or take out your opponent's warlord, and also give yourself cards in hand. So good card. You want 2 of those. My Soulless Jet Bikes are also good. Now these guys used to be 4 health instead of 3 health. So they would be a 5/4, which means that they would then come out, and then you'd have a 3/2 to deal with. And you could pump those guys up even more. Good times. They're down a little bit, but they're still playable. And again, we haven't seen too many changes. We're going to see a couple more changes, but this faction has not been changed radically, and these work very well. Late game, 4 energy to deal 5 damage. It's a functioning card. It's a good jet bike card. These are 2 to have in your deck. If you don't have them, they're worth the pickup when they are in the shop, definitely. Now, Odovacar, not so much. He's okay as an epic. I think he used to be a 4/5. I could be wrong. That would be way back when. His perfection has always been the same. His ability has always been the same. But frontline troops in general, especially with the Emperor's Children, they don't do a whole lot. You're really using him for his ability, if he sticks, to give either stat buffs or to help you get perfection on more troops. If you use him for frontline, it's okay to buy a little bit more time for Tarvitz or Lucius. But in all honesty, very much in the same way that the World Leaders and the Sons of Horus have seen, as the game has gone on, the neutrals have offered many better options at the same cost at 4 energy, not just in terms of frontline, but in terms of flanking, dealing damage. You've got some legendaries out there. You've got cards that are better at lower value, even for all intents and purposes. That have an immediate impact on the game. You could argue on that guy. That have an immediate impact on the game versus a guy who's just going to buy you a turn. So as much as Odovacar is an epic and he's okay, he's not one that I would recommend. I think you could find either a neutral option or just quite frankly go with another 4-drop option, such as just the Jet Bikes and the Eidichin Squad. Generally, if you have those 2, you should be set. As this card is terrible. There seems to be a thematic with all the Traitor Legion cards that give marks of chaos to their troops. They're not great. This card cost way too much. even though it's a perfection card and you could give them +1/+1 plus a Mark of Chaos, I hate, this is the number one card I hate to generate with Fulgrim, because either A, I will never play it because I have a lot of vehicles on board and no Astartes, so therefore it's not valuable to me, or when I play it, I get, Mark of Nurgle, and then I get +1/+1 on one troop, and it's bad. Don't play with this card. Chaplain Charmosian is not bad. He's certainly better than Ruined Palace, okay? Because he's actually a troop that you can play, and then you've got a 5/5 on your board. And this one gives all your non-demon troops, which includes vehicles, and that's a big difference on Mark of Chaos. It doesn't give them any stat buffs, but he does give them something. But it's random, and at the 5 cost in this game at this point in time, it feels like there's better options, or there's tighter options. I do think he's not bad. I think if you play a lot of troops, or if you're playing like Fabius Bile, he's a good way to bait out your opponent or to enhance what you've already got on the board. But I would rather play with the Odysseus squad as the 5 cost, because these guys were changed. These guys before didn't have flank, and so therefore they weren't worthwhile, but then they gained flank, and even if you use them for just that, drawing a card is nice, but the fact that they became in at a 5 with flank is very solid, and it helps deal with some of those high attack problems. It can deal with even, flanking a 5 attack on Canis Vertex on one of those weapons is really nice, and the fact that you get a draw card as a battle honor, as a flank action, you can have a little bit more control over it, whereas before as a troop you could just play him and you wouldn't be able to really gain anything from that, so you would pass on him. But this guy works a lot better, and you get something immediately from him, whereas Chaplain Charmosian, if you play him down and you haven't done anything with the rest of your troops on your board, your opponent has ways to respond. They can get rid of all your other troops and then get rid of the chaplain, and then you gain nothing. Whereas you can throw down Odysseus and choose how you use him on your turn and how that impacts. Noise Marines, now these guys have dropped down a bit in style, just in the fact as the game has evolved, and they're strong. They're, especially for early players, I think these are great cards to pick up and put in your deck. There's no reason not to have 2 of them. Saul Tarvitz can play these on turn 1 with a Tactical Brilliance. That's nothing to scoff at. That can buy you a lot of time, especially if you're able to boost their stats the following turn. But that's the key, because with that 4 health, that means they're really only around for a turn. Maybe 2 at best. So you want to make the most of it. Now that attack damage is nothing to scoff at. The Eddie Izzard face is nice. But the game has evolved to the point where they don't have the immediate in play, so you put them down. If your opponent has a flanker or more tactics to respond to them, you're not going to get as much value out of them. And I think as you get higher in the levels, that makes a bigger difference. So earlier players, newer players, can make more use of Noise Marine than more seasoned players. The Sirius Rhino held a spot in my heart because it was one of the cards I had as a new player in my Emperor's Children deck, but it is gradually become outclassed. It is a good card in a sealed deck, like an event deck or something like that. It's a good card. It's got decent health. You actually can withstand a crack grenade, and for 0 energy, you get an Astartes that costs 2 less in your hand, so that's good. But it's hard to say, because then at that point you're paying a lot of vehicles at these higher cost cards we're going to see. So are you gaining anything from that ability at that stage in the game, unless you don't have a lot of these high cost vehicles, in which case then yes, you would make use of Sirius vehicle. But otherwise, I would pass on Sirius, I'd pass on Noise Marine, and I would stick as Odysseus for your 5 cost. Now Agnomen, these guys can turn the game. It's very easy to achieve this perfection. Deal 4 damage to the enemy warlord. Not only do you have a giant 7/5 on board that your opponent has to deal with, you just dealt damage to the enemy warlord. And if they can't get rid of this, you're going to deal more damage. So these guys are 2 of possibly, arguably, a very strong 6-drop. Maybe the strongest they've got because of the immediate impact. Enhanced Warrior is not great. Thematically, it works. You need these guys in your starting hand, and then you need to kill a lot of your opponent's troops to make them worthwhile. and then you have to play him, and then if he gets removed, you're just, all that hard work and effort is lost. So pass. And I think he actually used to be a 3/4, if I remember correctly, when he started in your hand. So he was even stronger at one point. Those were the days. Perfection's Flight is the hard removal for the Emperor's Children. And as a one of, I think, aside from maybe Fulgrim, I feel like you could squeeze it as a one copy in each of your decks. Fulgrim might not need it because you could generate several of these in the course of the game. You don't have any control over that, but the possibility is high if he's not generating a destruction card. He could generate several of the tactics that either deal damage or jam. So he's got more range in responding. Perfection's Flight, though, 6 energy, you're destroying an enemy troop. It costs 1 more than the outflank from the Sons of Horus, but you're drawing a card with Perfection. So that's the trade-off. Excuse me. Rilla Noir is a great legendary, even though he's got some foibles. He's a vehicle, so he's susceptible to Melt-A-Bomb or to Direct Rask. But he has got just a fantastic ability, especially talking about Perfection. If your opponent cannot get rid of him on your turn, on their turn, then your next turn you're going to be bringing out some big fat nasty guys with Perfection, giving them +2/+2 and +2/+2 on the next one and the next one. And in the same way that Hall of Rights works as a booster and a detractor, so too does Rilla Noir. He also has Shield. He is susceptible to Ambassador Melgator, so that is another one of his weak areas. But I would say if you see him in the shop and you are on the fence, pick him up. You will not regret it. He's a very good legendary. Corrupted Battleship, once upon a time, was really useful because the game played where it required a lot of troops on board, and people would play late game 3 or 4 troops on board, some with frontline, the game is not in that state anymore. So it's possible to do some damage to your opponent with this, 2 damage, but you're better off paying 4 for Artillery Strike, which is a guaranteed on 3, versus with 2 troops on the board. Corrupted Battleship cost 5, and it's an epic. So even comparatively, they're stacked up. Like if your opponent has their Warlord and 2 troops, Artillery Strike is still superior to Corrupted Battleship, just side by side on that stand. And this is an epic. I feel like this card should be changed either more, either to deal 3 damage or to cost 2 less, and then go from there. Also, worth noting, Corrupted Battleship does not cost less for if your opponent is Canis Vertex. So you're not going to get any cost reduction for those Titan weapons. That's very important to note. It can get generated from Fulgrim, and again, it could be useful, but it's not as useful as it once was. The game state has changed to move along. This card has remained the same, but its use has not remained as useful. Kind of in the same way Noise Marine. Pride of the Emperor. Now we're talking about the closer. This is the closer for the faction, and it has seen some change. Once upon a time, a long time ago, its perfection, rather than return to your deck with -1 cost, was return to your hand with -1 cost. So, deal 7 back to my hand, and next turn, if you can't kill me, I'm going to deal 7 more. And then they changed that, and they reduced the damage that it would cost as well, so you would get 6 for 6, but then that's 13 damage. Then there was like one day where they did a patch and they messed it up, and like you could do like 99 damage or something like that with the Pride of the Emperor. They quickly fixed that. Where it is right now, it's not bad because it returns to your deck. Its cost is lower, but if you hit this on 7, and as I mentioned, if you're playing a deck that utilizes a lot of card drawing, like Therian Platoon, Lucius Divinatus, then you're burning through your deck faster, then your chances of playing Pride of the Emperor at 6 for 7, and then 5 for 7, and then 4 for 7, that's more than enough to really end the game. So it's got uses, it's got purposes, but ultimately 7 for 7. If you're at that 7 energy mark, and you've got your Warlord, and your opponent's Warlord is at 9, you've got lethal. If you've got other troops on board, or if you've got other fast troops or other options, you can stack up. You're really counting down to that mark, as all closers should be. This is the number 1 card for the Emperor's Children. If you see it in the shop, get this, if you're waiting to get, if you're holding out for the Emperor's Children cards, this should be the first legendary you get. Save your gems, 1,600 gems. You will not regret it. It will make your Emperor's Children games like change completely. Sardarian has changed, and they've changed for the better. These guys at one point did not have the perfection of gaining shield, and they really weren't playable. The game state was a little different. Ambassador Melgator could return any troops in hand, so a lot of high-cost troops just weren't getting played. But Sardarian gaining that perfection in conjunction with Saul Tarvis, again, bringing these guys out for 4 energy with a tactical brilliance. By comparison, a 6/8 with shield and a battle honor that gives it shield versus, you know, a 3/3 with a rally effect, it's going to win every time. Sardarian is a great troop, solid. They feel like Terminators, and I would recommend at least 1 in your decks. If you have 2, if you can fit in 2, and you're playing like a Tarvitz deck, then you certainly should have 2. Therian, if you don't have Sardarian, Therian is a very nice replacement because it is a common as opposed to an epic, and for perfection you're getting an 8/8. You don't gain shield, but you're gaining the punch and you're gaining the health. And then the next turn you can play another one. You know, so Therian is not bad as a replacement. Now they are vehicles, so they are susceptible to crack grenades and melt bombs, but an 8/8 that you could quickly turn into a 10/10 the next turn with an Unbreakable Focus should not be scoffed at. Eidolon, a long time ago, in a galaxy far, far away, Eidolon used to be Lucius. Believe it or not, that's before we had 4th Warlords. Lucius used to actually be a troop, and his ability was completely different. He cost the same. He was an 8-drop or a 9-drop, and his ability was he was a 9/9 or an 8/8 battle on or can act again. So his Warlord ability was the same, and he could work as a closer. And again, the game was more troop based, so you could play, kill all your opponent's troops, and then deal 8 damage to their face. That was nice. Eidolon is a little different. Eidolon stuns the attack when he's targeting. Stuns the attack, the target that he's attacking after he attacks it, whether he damages them or not, whether they have shield or not, he's gonna stun them. Perfection stunning the enemy warlord is really good, especially those late games against an aggressive warlord like Kabanda, or against Angeron, or Conrad Kurz, stunning them where they can't do anything. And then you've got this nasty 9/8 first captain of the Emperor's Children, who, by the way, is arguably my 2nd to 3rd least favorite character in the entire Horus Heresy Legion series. Yeah, he's at the top of my not favorite lists. He's a very strong card, though. I cannot deny that. He's a very strong card. You could make an argument for Pride of the Emperor being your number 1 and Eidolon being your number 2. Personally, I would say Pride of the Emperor your number 1, Rilla Noir your number 2, Eidolon your number 3 as far as legendaries. As far as legendary cards go, those are the cards that you're going to want to get. Hammer of Justice, no, I don't. I just don't pass on this. For 8 energy, you're getting a body on the board with an ability that destroys a troop, doesn't deal any damage. There's no point in using that ability. You could just deal 8 damage. For 8 energy, I would much rather pay 4 with Eidolon to deal 2, followed by my Soulless Jet Bikes to gain perfection and deals 5, and I just dealt 7 energy, and I played 2 troops. I dealt 7 damage, and I played 2 troops. Whereas for 8 energy here, I'm just playing a troop. It's just personally me, pass on that. Even with the supply lines concept and, Saul Tarvitz and Tactical Brilliance, I'd rather play Therian at 7 than Hammer of Justice at 8. And the same goes for Iron Column. I've never seen this card used, not even in events. If it has been in event decks, I don't think anybody has played it willingly. The Battle Honor to gain a Mark of Chaos, Okay, it doesn't do anything. There's no support in here. It's a 9. It's your classic. You will see through the card by cards, through every faction, that about 9 or 10 energy. Every faction has got a Land Raider that does nothing. That is like, we couldn't think of anything, so we made this big fat nasty thing. By comparison, and granted, rarity-wise, this is a better card. This is a legendary card compared to a common card, right? This has got a 10-10. Doesn't do anything on the rally, but it has shield, which means it's harder to get rid of. And it has cleave 10. So even if your opponent has out a front line next to their warlord, you're still going to hit their warlord for 10. If they have several front lines, you're going to kill all the front lines. That's just it. This is I'm not a fan of the artwork, but I cannot deny that the impact that this card has, and as I've said before, if you can play them out early for 4 or 5 energy with Tarvets, I mean, what's not to like? What's not to like? Well, I'll tell you what's not to like. If you're on the other side of that, you don't like it. That's what's not to like. If you're the opponent, you wouldn't like that. That's the Emperor's Children, guys. So as a faction, they're very good. As a faction, they have aged very well. Going through their cards, there are a couple cards that are still, they've got their meh uses, but they've only seen several cards that have actually seen improvements. Marketable improvements, to be sure. Cards that make a difference in terms of like Odysseus, Sardarian, big difference right there. And even Eidolon did not have the perfection initially. It just had the when attacking stun target, it gained that perfection. But the card pool itself has been very well balanced. It's stayed relatively well balanced, even with the warlords going up and down, peaks and valleys for Fulgrim, peaks and valleys for Lucius, Tarvis remaining at a steady clip. Even Fabius Bile, I think, who gets not played as often due to the random nature of his abilities, but anybody who's willing to sink some time into him and just play him consistently, you'll get your value out of Fabius Bile. You have a good time. Your opponent may not. When you play that 7-9 Bloodthirst Nisra Scout, they won't like it, but you will, and that's all that matters, right? Because you're a scientist. You're doing it for science. So that's the Emperor's Children, and as a whole, I think the faction is good. As a whole, they have aged well. They hold up very well. They are a very good entry faction for a new player to the game. They're very forgiving. They let you play tactics. They let you play troops. They let you deal damage. They give you a little bit of everything, and they respond well. They're very flexible. Their biggest oversight is if you overspend and you find yourself with no cards in hand, and then you're not able to capitalize or properly utilize the perfection mechanic. Because if you have 10 energy and you have a 4 cost card in your hand that triggers with perfection, you're not gaining anything from it. So that is it, guys. I hope this has been helpful. I hope this has been a good overview, flashback, taking a look at what the card by cards are for the Emperor's Children. If you liked what you saw, please like the video. If you haven't already subscribed, please subscribe to the channel. Let others know. If you've got any new players who are looking to get into the Emperor's Children, go ahead and have them take a look at this video, get an overview of the faction and some of the recommendations. As far as the faction goes, just one last time, I would say arguably, in terms of legendaries, Pride of the Emperor is your #1 legendary. In terms of epics for the card, for the faction as a whole, your best epic is probably the Sardarian. And there are just so many good rares here that it's hard to say what the #1 rare is. Agnamen is probably a high mention. Either Agnamen or the Soulless Jet Bikes. That's a very close call, and you can make use of both of those very easily with any warlord. So, but a very forgiving faction, and I recommend that if you're newer to the game, you check it out. You will appreciate them a lot more, and you'll feel comfortable playing the game. There's not a huge learning curve there. So that's it for me, guys. Until next time, we'll talk to you later, and keep playing Legions.